What's up, everyone, and welcome to the first ever episode of Movies to Be Murdered By. I'm your host, Jeff Watson, and I'm really looking forward to taking this journey with you as we go through all types of horror movies, and we're going to do some trailer reactions and different things. So I'm really excited about this opportunity to share with you. We're going to try to be a little bit different from most reviews and share a little bit more personal information as well as some backstory that most people may not have exposed before about a particular movie. So I'm really excited about this journey, and let's get to it.
If you haven't heard about Anchor, it's the easiest way to make a podcast. Let me explain. It's free. There are creation tools that allow you to record and edit your podcast right from your phone or computer. Anchor will distribute your podcast for you so it can be heard on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and many others. You can make money from your podcast with no minimum listenership. It's everything you need to make a podcast in one place. I use Anchor and it's been absolutely fantastic. So download the free Anchor app or go to anchor.fm to get started. So today we are going to be talking about the original Child's Play, which was released in 1988. To be specific, it was released on November 9th, 1988. I titled this episode Your Friend Till the End because I'm a huge fan of the Child's Play series as a whole. The first movie is absolutely my favorite, but I do like other films in the series, but I really wanted to talk about the original. Whenever we go into a horror movie, or really any movie that's not based in reality, the director, the writers, they're asking us to suspend our disbelief. And when it comes to this movie, it's so outlandish. It's so just completely different from any other horror movie that was made at that time. And the director and the writers are asking us, hey, for an hour and 27 minutes, we want you to believe that a doll is a serial killer that is terrorizing the city of Chicago. And as crazy as that sounds, it absolutely works. Admittedly, when I first watched this movie as a kid, it scared the absolute crap out of me. At that time, Cabbage Patch Kids, the My Buddy dolls were, which Chucky looks a lot like, they were a big thing then, and every kid wanted one. Every kid wanted one. And I remember after watching this movie, I did not pick up my Cabbage Patch doll or really any other action figure for a while. I never played with my Cabbage Patch doll ever again. Yeah, I was terrified. But it was just, the movie was terrifying as a kid, and as you get older, you know, obviously you look at it and you're like, really, that not gonna be afraid of a doll coming to life. But it makes you think. And the really good movies, even though you're suspending your disbelief, they make you say, well, I wonder what if. Like for me, it was, I wonder what would happen if one of my Cabbage Patch dolls just randomly started talking to me. I wonder what would happen if my Cabbage Patch doll just hurt someone and no one believed me. like I had those questions in my mind as a kid, and obviously that movie wasn't meant for kids, but it makes you ask a lot of questions. And even as an adult now, when I go back and watch those movies, it just makes me think, like, what if, what would happen if something like this were to actually occur? So again, the toys were a bit crazed then, and they kind of capitalized on this. To give a little side note, Chucky was actually not going to be named Chucky originally. He was actually going to be named Buddy, but because of the existing doll from Hasbro and all the legal things and some of the reception and controversy around the movie, they decided to go with a different name. So we'll start out with how the movie begins, which we're introduced to Charles Lee Ray, who's played by Brad Dourif, who also voices Chucky the doll. But we open up with that scene of him running through the streets, running away from Detective Mike Norris, who's played by Chris Sarandon in this film, and they're having a shootout. Charles Lee Ray's not a good guy. He's a criminal. He's a killer, and he's running from the police. And Mike Norris is chasing him. He shoots him, hits him one time, and then Charles Lee Ray is still running through the streets. Gets to the toy store, shoots a shot at the door to open it up. The alarm goes off. He goes into the toy store, and they continue to shoot at each other. Mike Norris clips him again. And at this point, Charles Lee Ray gets the idea that, hey, I'm going to transfer my soul into this doll. He performs a Haitian voodoo spell that he can transfer his soul into this doll. That's the closest thing to him at this point. So that's what he does. And it was a really cool, iconic scene where you see the clouds kind of coming over the toy store, and you see the lightning, and then once the transfer happens, there's a big explosion, and Mike Norris survives that, but you see that big explosion, and it's pretty cool scene. Then the next day we see Karen Barclay, who is played by Catherine Hicks. She wakes up to her son Andy Barclay, who's played by Alex Vincent, bringing her breakfast in bed, and he's spilling stuff all over the place, spilling milk all over the place. The toast is just completely burned to crap, and it's his birthday. He's all excited, and he sees this big box in his mom's room with a present, but it's not exactly what he wants. He's a little bit down because he really wants this good guy doll. And going back to the beginning, when Charles Lee Ray goes into the toy store, there's this huge display of good guy dolls there, and he, obviously through some of the back and forth action going on, they get knocked down, and that's how he comes to be close to this doll that falls like right in front of him. And when he gets shot again, that's when the closest doll to him, that's when he transfers his soul into that doll. So like a lot of things in the 80s, Andy was watching these different cartoons of the good guy doll, and that's how a lot of these toys during the 80s gained their popularity, because they'd be included in a cartoon, and that's how they were advertised. And every kid's like, I gotta have one. And Andy's mom, she's a single parent. She's trying to do the best that she can, and she just can't afford it. They're really expensive, like a lot of toys were back then, especially in a single parent home. And so Andy's disappointed because the gifts that his mom gives him, unfortunately, aren't the good guy doll. They are good guy toys, but it's not the doll, and he really wants the doll. So like it happens a lot of times in these movies, there's an opportunity for Karen to purchase this good guy doll through less than reputable means, we'll say. There's a peddler that has the doll at a very reduced price, we'll say, and that's how she's able to purchase the doll. So we'll fast forward a little bit, and later that evening, Andy's being babysat by one of Karen's friends, Maggie, who's about to find out a little bit about Chucky. And you see the typical thing where Andy's kind of talking to Chucky, and it looks like this cute little innocent story where he's got this friend now, and he's talking to him. And with the good guy doll, they were programmed to say a few phrases and words and those kind of things, and so there's a little interaction there, and you think, hey, this is normal. There's nothing wrong there. And then Maggie tells Andy to go to bed, and Andy does. She tells him to turn off the TV. He does. And then all of a sudden, TV comes back on, and Maggie's upset now because she's like, Andy, I told you that you need to go to bed. He's like, but I didn't do it. Chucky did it. And she's like, come on, don't blame it on the doll. We know it's you, blah, blah, blah. He's like, no, really, it's not me. And he goes back, lays down, and then all of a sudden we snap to a scene where Maggie's there in the kitchen, and you see the camera angle, and she ends up going out of the window. And when Karen comes home from work, because she ended up having to work late on her son's birthday due to a not so nice boss, she comes home, and the police are there, and it's just absolute chaos going on in her apartment. And Andy's like, look, I didn't do anything. I don't know what happened. I know Chucky did this and that. And the police are like, yeah, right. There's not a doll that's actually doing anything like this. And come on, cut it out, kid. And then they see footprints on the countertop, and everyone just automatically assumes that somehow, some way, Andy has pushed this lady out of the window, and he's just this bad kid. But Andy's adamant, like, look, this is Chucky. Chucky's doing this. I'm not doing this. He's telling me all these things. He said that you wouldn't believe me. All this stuff. And then, I'm not going to go through the entire movie, because if there are people out there that haven't seen it, please watch it. Because it really is a good movie. Again, suspend your disbelief. Don't go in completely cynical about it. It's meant to be a fun kind of twist on what slasher movies were back in the 80s. And this movie's really good, but there's this scene that really is probably one of the most terrifying scenes of the entire film. And it's, after all these things are happening, and Andy is so adamant that, hey, I'm not doing this, and this really is this doll that's doing this, and I promise it's not me. Karen decides to do what everyone should have done in the beginning, and that's check Chucky's shoes and look at the toy, look at the doll, and see if the batteries were in there. And the batteries were still in the box and not in the back of the doll. And when that happened, Chucky turns his head and says his iconic line, "Hi, I'm Chucky, wanna play?" And she freaks out, and then we see Chucky just lose his crap. And that was one of the most terrifying scenes of the movie, because as a kid, when I saw that scene, as soon as the movie was over, I checked every single one of my toys. Every single one. Every one that had batteries in it, and I had a Teddy Ruxpin at the time. I checked every single one of my toys to make sure they had batteries in it, to make sure they weren't going to come alive, or that they weren't alive, and whatever else. Now, obviously, as a kid, things like that kind of terrify you, but it was so well done in that moment, and I really appreciated how that scene was done. And then, you go through the different kills throughout the movie. You go through, get to the end of the movie, and you see this standoff between Mike Norris and Andy and Karen against Chucky, and how that all unfolded. And again, I'm not going to go into detail, just in case there are still people out there that haven't seen it. I've actually spoken to a few people that say, I've never seen Child's Play. How is it? And that's one of the reasons why I'm doing this podcast, is because not only do I want to appeal to the people and have interaction with the people who have seen these movies, I'd like to really get these movies out there in front of people that have never seen them. So that's one of the reasons behind this. So I don't want to give a whole lot away. Just know that it gets pretty crazy, and you see a lot of interesting kills, and Chucky is a tough little guy when you get to the end of the movie. What I will say about the series as a whole is that there have been so many sequels to Child's Play. You've got Child's Play 2 that came out in 1990. Child's Play 3 came out in 91. Bride of Chucky came out in 98. Seed of Chucky came out in 2004. Curse of Chucky came out in 2013, and Cult of Chucky came out in 2017. And there's even a TV series that is going to come to Sci-Fi that I'm really excited about, and really excited about seeing how they tell the different stories of Chucky. I'm wondering if it's going to be a prequel of sorts, if it's a deeper dive into events surrounding the first couple films. I'm just curious to see what happens, but I'm really excited about the direction of the series, and I'm also looking forward to. I know that there are talks to do an official reboot of the series. And some people may say, well, didn't they just reboot the series in 2019? Yes and no. The 2019 film was done by a completely different group of writers and directors. And I know a lot of people in interacting with people online, a lot of people said, well, which one are you reacting to? Which one are you doing a review for? Because I don't really like the 2019 version of Child's Play. And I said, I assured everyone, no, I'm doing the original. But I will say that I really enjoyed the 2019 film. And part of the reason why I enjoyed it is because the 2019 film takes the doll and the possession of the doll, and it changes it to modern times in terms of a technological basis for what happens with the Chucky doll, what happens with the My Buddy doll in that film, which I thought was a really clever way to do the twist and to modernize the story. At that time in the 80s, when we got Child's Play, that was a time where we saw a lot of possession films. We saw a lot of supernatural elements to horror movies. And the 2019 version of the film plays to what goes on from a technological standpoint. But there are talks that there's going to be a reboot from the original writers of the original Child's Play, to reboot the entire franchise and to start back over, which I'm really excited about. Again, big fan of the film series. I will say that some of the sequels got a little bit ridiculous. Seed of Chucky for me was one where I was like, I don't know about this one. It was more funny than it was horrific, but it was still a good film. It was still kind of carrying on that legacy, but just in a way that was not quite true to what we had seen in the previous films. It was a lot more outlandish than anything that we had seen to that point. I thought Bride of Chucky was really, really good. I really enjoyed that movie. The brutality in it, the kills, I thought were very well done. I really like Curse of Chucky, and I really like Cult of Chucky. I know a lot of people didn't like those so much, and I want to say that both of those were straight to DVD or streaming, which when you get into a series like this and you are making that many of them, that tends to happen. The quality tends to fall off. You don't get the names that you got in previous films, but I really thought those films were really good. They just didn't get the notoriety that the previous films received. So I want to do a couple other things before we wrap this podcast up. One of the things I really want to do with this podcast is make sure that it is interactive and that we have social media that we can go to for different polls, different questions, comments, those types of things. And the one thing I'll say about the response that I've gotten thus far on social media has been absolutely fantastic, beyond my wildest dreams. We started our Twitter account a week ago, and we're already up to 113 followers as of today. So just blown away. Thanks to everyone for the support. Really means a lot to me. But one of the questions we put out was, which Child's Play was your favorite, the original or one of the sequels? What are some of your favorite Chucky moments and your first thoughts when you saw the movies? And we got a few responses here. Karen actually gave us a photo of her and her good guy dog, which was pretty cool. We've got another comment here that says the original is classic. After that, it kept getting more and more satire, less scary, which I agree with. Once you get to, I felt like Bride of Chucky was a lot of satire and funny stuff, but once you get into Seed of Chucky, it's like, okay, now we're getting really, really out there. Jesse says, Jesse Drew, who will be a guest on the podcast soon. I will be announcing that, so shout out to Jesse. The original is the best because the movie's filmmaking team seemed sincere in making a scary film, and that's a great point, because that first one was pretty scary. Joe, who's also going to be a guest on the podcast, Joe Mikulachik, he says the original will always be my favorite. Just the creepiness of it, as well as the actors in it. Chris Sarandon was a favorite of mine coming off of Fright Night. The overall theme was something new and different, unlike the other slasher films of the 80s. And that's what I was saying before, is that, we were getting Jason, we were getting Michael Myers, Freddy Krueger. To have this doll now be a killer, a serial killer, in the same vein as the guys I previously mentioned, it was a different twist on the genre. And then my friend Ari, she says, my favorite is Curse of Chucky. To me, it's the only one of those that I've seen that's actually scary. And then she says, let's play the scene at the ending. She almost jumped out of her skin. Though that Curse of Chucky was really good, I will say. But for me, the original will always hold a very special place in my heart, not only because it scared the crap out of me, but because I really felt like it was a solid film, and I really did enjoy it. Once I got older. When I was a kid, I was terrified, but once I got older, I really appreciated it and was able to look at it through a different lens and really appreciated the feeling, the vibe of the entire movie, the way certain movements that Chucky had were done. I mean, it was just an excellent film. If you're a horror fan and you like those kinds of things, and you pay attention to all the little subtleties of a character. So another thing we're going to do on this podcast is we're going to rate. We're going to rate the movie, and our own little rating system is we're giving these movies tombstones, headstone ratings. So out of a possible 5 headstones, depending on the movie, how we like it, that's the rating that we'll give it. So for our very first rating in our very first podcast, I'm going to give Child's Play, the original 1988 version of Child's Play, I'm going to give it 4 out of 5 headstones. I felt like there were some parts in the movie, just from continuity standpoint, that didn't really make sense. I would like to get a little more backstory on Charles Lee Ray, the person, before he transferred his soul into the doll. But other than that, I thought the mood of the film was spectacular. I thought the actors that were in there, I really enjoyed them. I just thought it was a really good movie. So 4 out of 5 tombstones, headstones, whatever you call them. But 4 out of 5 for us. And I really enjoyed the film, and going back and preparing for this podcast, I watched the movie a couple more times, and I just really enjoy the film. It's so out there, and it's just a fun hour and 27 minutes, and it really is a good film. And if you haven't seen it, please watch it. Right now it's streaming on Netflix. I believe it's also on Amazon Prime Video. So if you haven't seen the film, go check it out. It's definitely worth it. I think you will appreciate it. If you've seen the newer film, but you haven't seen the original, go back and watch the original and share your thoughts. Let us know what you think about the two films in comparison. And before we get out of here, I just want to make sure that we let everyone know we are on Twitter, and it's Movies to Be Murdered By on Twitter, and our actual handle is at so TO_murdered. I didn't pick that out. Twitter did it for me, so let me pick it out. But give us a follow on there. We'll be doing different polls, different things there. Really excited about the future of this podcast, and hopefully, we get a good response with this one. But until next time, I'm Jeff Watson, and have a good time watching some horror movies this weekend. Have a frightful, delightful weekend. Take care.